And Jesus answered and said to him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who's in heaven." Now, Jonah may have been one of the names of Peter's father. Bar is the Aramaic of Hebrew ben, son. But sonship in Hebrew is not simply pedigree. It means also in the character of. Peter was in the character of Jonah. Jonah the prophet. Shimon Bar Yonah. Remember, Jonah was in Jaffa. And he didn't want to go to the Gentiles, remember? And so in the book of Acts, chapter 10, Peter is in Jaffa. He didn't want to go to the Gentiles. Jesus is making a prophecy. He's identifying Peter as being in the character of Jonah, not wanting the gospel to go to non-Jews. Peter was in the character of Jonah. It was fortuitous that the name of his father may have been Jonah. And I also say to you that you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not overpower it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And whatever you shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you shall loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Then he warned the disciples that they should not tell anyone that he was the Messiah. Notice it wasn't only Peter who recognized it. All the disciples did. A text out of context is always a pretext. Immediately after this, the same Peter is rebuked by Jesus, who says, "Satan, get thee hence," in verse 23. The doctrine of the papacy rests centrally on a misinterpretation out of all reasonable context and setting of this particular passage. That Peter is the rock. Is he? Is he infallible? The doctrine of infallibility of the Pope was proclaimed in 1854 by Pius IX, a man who issued an encyclical called Quanta Curia, denouncing democracy, among other things. Can we look at the PowerPoint upon this rock? This is Caesarea Philippi. Those waterfalls come down from the sky, virtually. It's snow-capped about 7.5 months of the year. It's called Har Hermon, Mount Hermon. It was the actual site of the Mount of Transfiguration. And what would happen is the water would come down through the water table as the snow caps melted through a cascade. Can we go back to the water, please? The waterfalls would be to the left of these alcoves where these buildings are. Can we go back, please? As the snow caps melt, they come down. All over the ground, if you've been there, you've seen millions of chips of small, flat stone, roughly the size of the thumbnail of a human. All over the ground, in the brook and on the sides of the brook, millions of these flat stones. Can we go back again to the picture? Mount Hermon, according to Apocrypha and Jewish history, is where the Nephilim came down and procreated with human women in the days of Jared. It's where the demons came down. That's why Jesus went up there. And he challenged the gods of this world on their own turf. Caesarea Philippi was built by the Herods to impress the Romans. Under the Seleucid Greeks, it was a temple of Pan, the Greek god Pan, who had his nymphs. The priests of Pan had surrogate sex with goats. They practiced ritual bestiality at this location. Pan in Greek mythology was a god who pretended to be a man. And to this day, in the alcoves carved into the facade of the cliff, you'll see where the statues and statuettes were. Pan was a god who pretended to be a man. On the other hand, Caesar was a man who pretended to be a god. This was built to Octavius, Caesar Augustus. He was the first Caesar deified in his lifetime. Now remember, when Jesus was born, he had people numbered, didn't he? He took a census of the known world in order to gain economic control. Caesar Augustus, a ruler of the Roman Empire, counted everybody to gain economic control of the Roman Empire, which constituted most of the known world. So when Jesus came the first time, the people were assigned a number. Not on their head, but they were all given a number. That's why Jesus had to go to Bethlehem to be born. Mary and Joseph went there. Tabulated according to tribe and family. So when he comes the first time, you have somebody who's a Caesar, a ruler of the Roman Empire, assigning people a number to gain economic control of the world, somebody who's deified in his lifetime. When Jesus comes back, it's the same thing. You have an antichrist in the character of the Roman emperors who will again number people to gain economic control of the world. What happened in his first coming is a picture of what happens in his second. So it was here at Caesarea Philippi, at the foot of Mount Hermon, where you had Pan, a god pretending to be a man, and you had Caesar, a man pretending to be a god, both worshipped. Jesus challenges the gods of this world on their own turf, because Jesus was neither a man pretending to be a god, nor was he a god pretending to be a man. He was both God and man, fully human and fully divine. There was a reason he came here and did this where he did it. This is Caesarea Philippi. Now we're told Peter's the rock. Can we go to the next frame, please? Those little stones all over the ground, one of those is called a Petros. It is simply a Greek translation from the Hebrew word Evan. There is a similar word in Aramaic for these terms. Petros, one of these small chips of stone. Back to the picture, please. However, the facade of this cliff and the stone base, it's all stone to this day, I've stood on it 100 times, is not a Petros, it is a Petra. Petra, from the Hebrew word Selah. Selah. Back again to the words. Selah, Petra, a rock or boulder. Small chip, Petros, where you get Peter's name. Back to the photo, please. You see the temples. Could Herod have used one of those little chips of stone still all over the ground coming out of the cascade? Actually, due to seismic activity, the cave from where the cascade comes has shifted. It's about 25 meters to the left of that this day. Could Herod's engineers and architects have used a little chip of stone to build one of those buildings? No, you cannot use a Petros as a foundation stone for a large building. You must use a Petra, like the city in Jordan, in Edom. It's illogical to say you can put a building, be it a temple or a church, on a Petros. You can only put it on a Petra. Now, of course, in the Middle Ages, there was widespread illiteracy, even among the clergy. You had mendicant orders, even priests couldn't read very often, and the ones who could read the Latin Vulgate. They could not read the original Greek and Hebrew, so therefore the rock could be proclaimed to be Peter because people didn't know the original languages. Neither did they know much about the actual history and architectural history of Caesarea Philippi. Well, it is argued by Roman Catholic scholars who had to deal with this issue that, yes, but Peter is a male. And therefore, because he is a male, not a female, in Greek, Petra is a female noun. So Jesus had to use, or the writers of the Gospels had to use the masculine Petros. You couldn't call a boy something feminine. In English, that is true. But it is not true in Greek. In the Greek language, you have masculine, feminine, and neuter, as in English. But gender in Greek does not primarily have to do with sex or necessarily with sex at all. Gender has to do with the way a word is used in the context and structure of a sentence. The fact is, St. Paul calls Jesus by the feminine. Turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 10.